My name is Jack Miller, and I'm 49 years old. I've spent the last 24 years married to Amanda, my wife who just turned 51. Amanda is everything you'd expect of an Ivy League professor: brilliant, driven, and passionate about her work. When we first met, I was the one with big dreams but empty pockets, hustling day and night to build something from nothing. I started with a tiny bakery in New Jersey, barely making ends meet. Amanda stood by me through those tough early years, steady as a lighthouse in a storm. She was just starting her teaching career back then, working as a junior lecturer at the university. We were both dreamers, both fighters. I remember those late nights when we'd sit in our tiny apartment, sharing cheap takeout and expensive dreams. She'd grade papers while I calculated ingredient costs and tweaked recipes. When my first bakery started gaining traction, I made sure to support Amanda's ambitions too. Teaching isn't just a job, it's a calling that requires years of dedication and countless sacrifices. So when I started doing better, I supported my wife financially and emotionally through her PhD and beyond. We were a team, lifting each other higher, believing in each other's dreams. Now, 24 years later, those dreams have become reality. My small bakery has grown into Miller's Artisan Bakeries, one of the most successful chains in the tri-state area. Amanda has become a respected professor at Princeton, known for her work in comparative literature. We live in an upscale suburb in New Jersey, in a beautiful colonial house with a wraparound porch. It's the kind of neighborhood where kids still ride their bikes on the sidewalk, and people actually know their neighbors' names. Our house has that timeless charm you can't manufacture, probably because it's soaked in years of love and memories. At least that's how I used to feel about it. Lately, though, something has shifted. Our marriage, once so comfortable and secure, now feels like a sweater that's been washed too many times, familiar, but not quite right. Amanda and I have always been busy people. I'm up before dawn most mornings, checking on the bakeries, making sure everything runs smoothly. She's usually out the door not long after, heading to campus for early meetings or classes. But over the past few months, we've started moving like two ships on separate courses. By the time I come home, exhausted and smelling of flour and vanilla, she's either at a late faculty meeting or locked in her home office. At first, I didn't think much of it. We've been married long enough to know that careers sometimes demand extra time and energy. But then I started noticing the little things. The bright, form-fitting blouses she started wearing to work. The designer perfume that replaced her usual subtle scent. The way she'd check her phone more frequently, always angling the screen away from me. The first time I noticed her new wardrobe. I teased her about it. That's quite a fancy outfit for grading papers, isn't it? She smiled, but it didn't quite reach her eyes. You know how it is, Jack. Gotta keep up with the younger faculty. She kissed my cheek and breezed past me like it was nothing. But it wasn't nothing. I didn't want to believe it. Still don't really. But something kept nagging at me, a quiet whisper in the back of my mind telling me to pay attention. Maybe I was blind, or maybe I just didn't want to see. Betrayal was something that happened to other people, not us, not Jack and Amanda Miller, the power couple who'd built something real together. We'd raised two amazing kids and weathered more storms than I can count. Emma, our daughter, now 21, is halfway across the world in Tokyo. She's pursuing her dream of becoming a Japanese language specialist, and I couldn't be prouder. Then there's Ryan, my sister's son who became ours when tragedy struck. At 25, he's carved out his own path as a software engineer in New York City. When my sister and her husband died in that terrible accident 12 years ago, Amanda didn't hesitate. He's family, she said. He belongs with us. Those early years with Ryan weren't easy. He was a teenager dealing with unimaginable loss, but we got through it together. Or so I thought. Looking back now, I realize that life has a way of lulling you into a false sense of security. You think the waters are calm and steady, but storm clouds are gathering just over the horizon, out of sight. That morning felt like one of those deceptively peaceful days. I was enjoying a rare day off, something I seldom allowed myself. My bakeries ran like well-oiled machines most days, thanks to the incredible team I'd built over the years. The house was quiet, almost eerily so. Emma was in Japan, Ryan was busy with his life in the city, and Amanda had left for campus about 15 minutes earlier. I sat on our leather couch, a steaming mug of coffee in hand, savoring the rare peace. Sunlight poured through the bay windows, casting warm patterns across the hardwood floors. For a moment, I let myself believe that everything in my life was exactly as it should be. But looking back, I realized there were signs I'd ignored. The distance between Amanda and me that had grown so gradually, I barely noticed. The way her laugh seemed forced when I asked about her evening plans. The subtle shift in her body language when her phone buzzed during dinner. Little things, like the breeze that brushes your face before a storm hits. I leaned back, closing my eyes for a moment. We'd overcome so many challenges together. Surely nothing could touch us now. Then came a knock at the door. It startled me out of my thoughts. In our quiet suburb, unexpected visitors were rare, especially on a weekday morning. I set my coffee down and stood, feeling a faint flicker of unease. Who could it be? A neighbor? Someone selling something? I walked to the door, my hand hesitating on the handle. It was such an ordinary thing, a knock at the door. But why did it feel like something was about to change? As I reached for the handle, I couldn't help but think of those storm clouds gathering on the horizon, unseen until it's too late. When I opened the door, I was met by a woman I didn't recognize. She looked to be in her early 40s, maybe 5 years younger than me. Her outfit was simple, a blouse and jeans, but her face caught my attention. She looked nervous, pale, and exhausted, like she hadn't slept in days. It was the kind of look people wear when they're hanging on by a thread. For a moment, she just stared at me, her lips slightly parted as if trying to form words. My eyes drifted to her hands, and I froze. She was holding a small pepper spray, the kind women carry for self-defense. Immediately, my guard went up. Who was this woman? What did she want? My heart started racing, though I tried to stay calm. She must have noticed my reaction because she quickly stuffed the pepper spray in her purse. Ah, she began, her voice trembling. I'm sorry, I think I might have the wrong address. I stood there speechless for a moment. My first instinct was to end the encounter right then and there. Close the door, lock it, and forget about this strange woman who looked like she was about to either cry or attack me. But something in her eyes stopped me. There was fear there, yes, but also desperation. Did you want something? I asked cautiously, breaking the heavy silence. She fumbled with her words. No. I mean, yes. I think I made a mistake. Were you looking for someone in particular? I pressed gently. She shifted on her feet, clearly uneasy. Yes, I was looking for Amanda, but I must be mistaken. Hearing my wife's name sent a cold wave through me. This wasn't some random encounter. Amanda? I asked, trying to keep my voice neutral. You mean my wife? She left about 15 minutes ago. I'm her husband. Is there a problem? As soon as I said that, something in her broke. Her shoulders sagged, and her face crumpled as tears welled up in her eyes. She started trembling, and before I could even think, she began to cry. It wasn't just quiet tears either. Her whole body shook, and her sobs came out in jagged gasps. I didn't know what to do. The sight of someone breaking down like that, on my doorstep no less, tugged at something in me. Whatever was going on, this woman clearly needed help. Hey, I said softly. Come inside. You look like you need to sit down. She hesitated, her tear-streaked face staring at me like she wasn't sure if she could trust me. But then she gave a small nod, and I stepped aside, motioning for her to enter. I guided her to the kitchen and pulled out a chair for her at the table. Sit here. I'll make you some coffee. As I moved around the kitchen, grabbing a mug and putting on the kettle, I glanced at her out of the corner of my eye. She sat hunched over, dabbing her eyes with a tissue she'd fished out of her purse. Her breathing was still uneven, but the sobbing had started to quiet. Once the coffee was ready, I placed it in front of her and sat across from her. "Here," I said gently. "Take your time." She picked up the cup with trembling hands and took a sip. The warmth seemed to help. Her breathing slowed, and some color returned to her cheeks. "My name is Rachel," she said finally, her voice soft and shaky. "Rachel," I repeated, leaning forward slightly. "Okay, so what's going on? You said you were looking for my wife. Is there some kind of problem?" She nodded, but her words seemed to catch in her throat. Her hand went to her temple, massaging it like she was trying to force herself to think. I wanted to talk to her," she stammered, "but now I don't know if I should have come here." I kept my voice calm. "Look, whatever it is, you're clearly upset. If you're having a problem with Amanda, maybe I can help. To start from the beginning. Take it slow." Rachel sipped her coffee, her grip on the cup tightening. She looked at me, her eyes filled with an unsettling mix of fear and guilt. "I'm sorry," she whispered. "I've been so nervous, my whole system is shot, and I probably seem crazy to you." I shook my head. "You seem like someone who's going through something hard. Just take your time. I'm listening." She nodded, but for a moment she just sat there, her gaze fixed on the table. When she finally spoke, her voice was barely above a whisper. "It's about your wife," she said. My chest tightened, a sudden, overwhelming feeling of dread washing over me. "What about her?" Rachel took a long, shaky breath, her hands tightening around the coffee mug. "I wanted to take revenge on your wife," she admitted, her voice raw. "I thought I'd find her here and confront her. I even thought about using the pepper spray." She gestured toward her purse. I was so angry, so hurt, but I realize now how close I came to making a huge mistake. Maybe God stopped me from doing something I'd regret. I sat frozen, her words reverberating in my head. "Why?" I asked, struggling to keep my voice steady. "What happened between you and my wife that would make you want to do something so drastic?" Rachel hesitated, her face crumpling. She glanced at me with a mixture of shame and despair. "I don't even know where to start," she said. "You seem like a kind man, and to tell you the truth, I'm ashamed to even share this with you." I forced a small, reassuring smile, though inside I felt like the ground beneath me was crumbling. "Rachel, whatever it is, I need to know the truth. If it involves my wife, it involves me too. Please, just tell me." For a moment she stared at me, her eyes searching mine. Then she nodded, as if convincing herself that she had no choice. "The thing is," she began, her voice trembling, "your wife Amanda is dating my husband." Her words hit me like a freight train. I felt my breath catch in my throat, my mind racing to keep up. "I'm sorry," I said, my voice hollow. "Can you repeat that?" Rachel nodded slowly, her lips pressing together in a grim line. "Your wife and my husband David, they've been seeing each other. I have proof." I leaned back in my chair, struggling to process what I was hearing. This couldn't be real. Not Amanda. Not after everything we'd been through. "My husband is a professor," Rachel continued, her words spilling out faster now, as if she couldn't hold them back any longer. "He teaches at Rutgers. I've suspected him for months, but I couldn't find any real evidence. Just little things, you know? Late nights, unexplained expenses." She glanced down, her hands shaking slightly as she spoke. "But then I finally caught him." "Caught him?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. "How?" "I installed a hidden camera in our home," she said, her voice cracking. "I didn't want to, but I was desperate to know the truth. And that's how I found out." "Found out what?" I asked, though part of me already knew the answer. "That he brought Amanda to our house," she said, her voice cracking. "While I was out, he brought your wife into my home. And that's not all." She paused, taking a shaky breath. I checked our bank statements, and there were charges for things he couldn't explain: an apartment rental, a hotel room. When I confronted him, he denied it all, said it was for work or meetings. But I knew. She trailed off, her eyes glistening with fresh tears. I felt like my chest was about to burst, but outwardly, I managed to keep my composure. Rachel, I said carefully, do you still have the video? She nodded, sniffling. Yes. I thought you might want to see it. I know this is a lot to take in, but I swear to you, I'm not lying. I didn't respond right away. My thoughts were a hurricane, but on the outside, I kept my voice calm. Okay, let me see it. Rachel hesitated, searching my face, then reached into her purse and pulled out her phone. Her hands trembled as she unlocked it and scrolled through her gallery. Here, she said, sliding the phone across the table. I took it, my hand steady despite the storm raging inside me. On the screen was a video, the timestamp showing it had been recorded just a week ago. I hesitated, staring at the play button, knowing that once I pressed it, there would be no turning back. And then, with a deep breath, I tapped the screen. The video started, grainy but clear enough. It was a wide shot of a living room, Rachel's living room, I assumed. At first, there was nothing, just an empty room. Then a man entered the frame. He was tall, broad-shouldered, and looked about my age. He walked in confidently, glancing behind him, and then she followed. Amanda. I felt like I'd been punched in the gut. There was no mistaking her. The way she carried herself, the way she smiled. It was my wife. In the video, David leaned in and kissed her. Not a quick kiss between friends, but an intimate kiss. They sat on the couch together, laughing, talking, oblivious to the camera that had captured everything. I couldn't watch anymore. I handed the phone back to Rachel, my hands suddenly unsteady. Are you okay? She asked cautiously, her voice soft. I didn't know how to answer her. My mind was a mess of emotions: shock, rage, heartbreak, humiliation. But more than anything, I felt an overwhelming need for answers. I don't know, I admitted, my voice barely audible. Rachel nodded sympathetically. I'm so sorry, she said. I didn't want to hurt you, but you deserve to know. I sat back in my chair, staring at the table. My world, the one I thought I knew, had just shattered into pieces. I sat in stunned silence, Rachel's words echoing in my head. How had I missed it? Every late night Amanda claimed was a work meeting. Every sudden change in her mood. Every outfit that seemed out of character. It all made sense now. The signs had been there, clear as day, but I had turned a blind eye. As Rachel spoke about how she had been following David, her voice rising with frustration and anger, my thoughts were elsewhere. I felt like I was looking at my life from the outside, watching it unravel one thread at a time. I'm done being his doormat, Rachel said, her voice trembling with emotion. I want everyone to know what he's done. I want people to see who he really is. Not just me, but Amanda too. I'm ready to take this public. I looked at her, the rawness of her pain mirrored in my own heart. And how do you plan to do that? I asked quietly. She hesitated, her hands fidgeting with her coffee mug. That's the problem, she admitted. I'm stuck. David and I have had our share of fights, big ones. After the last one, he decided to teach me a lesson. He cut me off from our accounts. I've been out of work for 6 months, and now I can't even afford to hire a lawyer. The desperation in her voice was palpable. I tried getting a loan, she continued, but my credit's a mess, and no one will approve me. I'm stuck. I want to fight him, but I don't have the resources, and honestly, I don't know where to start. Her honesty struck a chord in me. Rachel wasn't just someone scorned. She was trapped, fighting a losing battle with no way out. I thought about everything I had built. My bakeries, my savings, my ability to act where she couldn't. A plan started to form in my mind. Rachel, I said carefully, What if I help you? She looked up surprised. What do you mean? I leaned forward, keeping my tone steady. You've already given me the proof I need to end my marriage. That video, it's enough to make sure Amanda can't lie her way out of this. But I want you to give me the original recording too. In exchange, I'll make sure we both come out of this stronger. I'll consult with my lawyer, not just about my divorce, but yours as well. We'll handle both of them. Her eyes widened. You do that? But why? Because we're in this together now, I said simply. Your husband betrayed you. My wife betrayed me. This isn't just about exposing them. It's about protecting ourselves and getting justice. You need a lawyer, and I can pay for one. Consider it a loan. You can pay me back later. Rachel stared at me, her expression a mixture of hope and disbelief. But what about Amanda? Aren't you worried about making things worse? I've already decided what I'm going to do, I said firmly. No big scenes, no shouting matches. I'll meet with the lawyer, get everything in order, and file the papers. Amanda will find out when she's served, quiet, clean, and unarguable. And I suggest you do the same with David. If we play this smart, we'll come out ahead. Rachel nodded slowly, her composure starting to return. Okay, she said softly. If you're serious, I'll give you the original video, and I won't do anything drastic. At least not until we've spoken to the lawyer. Good, I said. We'll exchange contacts. I'll keep you updated on everything, and we'll take it step by step. We spent the next few minutes exchanging information. Before she left, I reassured her one last time. You're not alone in this anymore, I said. We'll figure it out. Once Rachel was gone, the house felt unbearably quiet. I sat at the kitchen table, staring at the phone in my hand. Every fiber of my being screamed for confrontation. To call Amanda and demand answers. To lay everything out in front of her and see the look on her face. But I didn't. Not yet. Instead, I met with a lawyer the very next day. Mark Stevens was one of the best divorce attorneys in New Jersey. I explained the situation in detail. Amanda's affair, Rachel's predicament, the video evidence. Mark assured me that the case for divorce was solid. I asked him to take on Rachel's case as well, paying for his services up front. She's in a difficult position, I told him, but she deserves a fair fight. Mark agreed, and with that, the wheels were set in motion. Divorce papers were drawn up for both me and Rachel. A week later, I met with Rachel again to give her an update. She was grateful, but I could tell she was still struggling. She mentioned her financial situation again, and that's when another idea struck me. Rachel, I said, I have an opening at one of my bakeries. It's nothing fancy, but it's a steady paycheck. You'd be able to save some money and pay me back for the lawyer if that's what you want. What do you think? Her eyes lit up, and for the first time, I saw a spark of hope in her. I'd love that, she said. Thank you, Jack. Really, it's the least I can do, I replied. As I drove home that evening, I felt the faintest sense of relief. When the divorce papers were ready, I knew exactly how I wanted to proceed. I didn't want Amanda to find out from a stranger, nor did I want to create a public scene. This was something I needed to face head on. It was a Thursday evening when I finally had the opportunity. Amanda came home later than usual, her heels clicking against the hardwood floor as she walked in. She placed her bag on the counter, letting out a sigh. Normally, I might have asked why she was late. Not tonight. I was sitting at the dining table, the papers neatly stacked in front of me. Amanda, I said, my voice calm but firm. She turned, her expression shifting as she took in my serious tone. What's wrong? She asked, her brow furrowing. I held up the divorce papers, letting the weight of the moment settle in the air. These are for you, I said. They're divorce papers. I know about your affair with David. Her face went pale, and for a split second, I saw a genuine shock flash in her eyes. What are you talking about? She asked, her voice trembling slightly. Her denial quickly shifted into an attack. You know what? If something did happen, and I'm not saying it did, it would be your fault anyway, she snapped. I raised an eyebrow, leaning back in my chair. My fault? Go on, Amanda. I'm curious to hear this. Her hands clenched into fists at her sides. You never pay attention to me anymore, Jack. You're always working, always at the bakeries. When was the last time we went on a real date? When was the last time you looked at me like I was more than just part of the furniture? So you cheated to fix our marriage? I asked, incredulous. Her face twisted, and she hesitated for a moment before changing tactics. It wasn't even a real affair, she said, her voice rising. It was just something to stir things up, to make you notice me again. That's all it was. I met David at a conference, and he was so lively, so full of energy. I wanted to tease you, to get you to wake up. I couldn't stop the laugh that escaped me. It wasn't a joyful laugh. It was bitter, almost hollow. Amanda, you're a brilliant woman, I said. But you're telling me this story like you're a teenager caught between two boys at a high school dance. Do you realize how absurd you sound right now? She flinched, the cracks in her resolve showing. I'm serious, Jack, she said, her voice trembling. It was just a stupid fling. It didn't mean anything. I was bored. We've achieved so much together, but it's like we've hit a wall. Everything felt so predictable. I shook my head slowly, the anger simmering beneath my calm exterior. Predictable, I repeated. So instead of talking to me, instead of telling me you felt that way, you decided the best solution was to sleep with another man? And you thought that would fix us? It wasn't like that, she cried, tears welling in her eyes. I didn't want it to go as far. I thought dash. You thought what, Amanda? I interrupted. That I wouldn't find out? That I'd just keep walking around in the dark while you played whatever game this was? She froze, her lips trembling as she struggled to find an answer. Then she tried a different approach. Jack, she said softly, her voice breaking. Please don't do this. Don't throw away everything we've built. It wasn't cheating, it was a way to get your attention. My stomach churned at her words. Amanda, I said, my voice sharp, don't insult me. I've seen the video. Her face drained of color completely. What video? It doesn't matter now. You'll find out later which one, I said, not bothering to sugarcoat it. The one where you're not just kissing David, but also everything else. Her hand flew to her mouth, and for a moment, she looked like she might collapse. I leaned forward, my voice cold. I didn't watch that part, by the way. I don't need to. The little I did see was enough. Tears streamed down her face as she tried to stammer out a response. Jack, I dash. Save it, I said, cutting her off. This conversation is over. I've already made up my mind. You can keep trying to justify it to yourself, but it won't change anything. I deserve better than this. Better than you. Amanda broke down, sobbing into her hands, but I didn't feel sorry for her. Not anymore. I stood, grabbing my jacket. The papers are on the table. You can sign them or let the lawyers handle it. Either way, we're done. Without another word, I walked out of the house, leaving her to deal with the wreckage she had created. The weeks leading up to the trial passed in a haze. My days were filled with meetings with Mark, finalizing details, and mentally preparing myself for what lay ahead. Our trial took place almost simultaneously with Rachel's. It was a logistical challenge for Mark, who had to juggle both cases. But if anyone could pull it off, it was him. He handled each detail with precision, ensuring that both Rachel and I walked into those courtrooms with confidence. Amanda and I divided our property as expected, with one significant exception, the house. That was non-negotiable for me. I had built so much of my life around it. Every corner of that place held memories, good and bad. I'd poured my soul into making it a home, and I wasn't about to let it go. Thankfully, Mark struck a deal that allowed me to keep it. Amanda seemed too exhausted to fight much by then. The fire that had once defined her spirit was now reduced to flickers. When the gavel finally came down, I felt a strange mix of relief and sadness. We were officially divorced. The hardest part of it all was explaining the truth to Emma and Ryan. I decided to tell them in person, flying Emma back from Tokyo and having Ryan drive down from New York. They deserved to hear it from me, face to face. We sat in the living room, the same room where I'd first watched that damning video. Emma clutched Ryan's hand as I told them everything. They were shocked, hurt, but ultimately supportive. "Dad," Emma said, her voice trembling, "I'm so sorry she did this to you." Ryan, always the protective one, was angry. "How could she?" he demanded. "After everything you've done for her? For us?" I tried to keep them from taking sides, but it was inevitable. They continued to speak with Amanda, but the warmth was gone, replaced with something colder, more distant. Amanda moved into a small apartment across town, left to face the consequences of her choices. Rachel's trial unfolded smoothly as well. David, arrogant and dismissive, had tried to fight her claims. But the evidence was damning. The video, the financial records, the testimony of others. They painted a clear picture of his betrayal. In the end, Rachel walked away with her rightful share of their assets. Justice was served, and it didn't take long for another bombshell to drop. David had another mistress. Amanda, the woman he had so passionately pursued, became just another discarded piece in his game. After the divorce, he severed ties with her entirely. Rachel, on the other hand, was a different woman. Freed from the weight of her toxic marriage, she began to thrive. She continued working at one of my bakeries, and I saw something in her resilience, a quiet strength that had been buried for far too long. Over time, she proved herself indispensable. Her work ethic, attention to detail, and ability to connect with both customers and employees set her apart. I promoted her to regional manager, and she flourished in her new role. Watching her grow was a reminder of what people are capable of when given the chance to heal. As for me, recovery has been slow. The betrayal cut deep, and the scars are still there. But I've come to terms with the lessons it taught me. Trust is vital in any relationship, but it can't be blind. I've learned to look past the surface, to notice the small shifts before they become storms. And perhaps most importantly, I've realized that when trust is broken, it's better to confront the truth than to live in denial or cling to something irreparably damaged. Emma visits more often now, worried about her old man being alone. Ryan calls almost daily, checking in under the pretense of asking for business advice. Their concern touches me, but I assure them I'm okay. And surprisingly, I am. There's peace in knowing I did what was right. For myself, for my family, and even for Rachel. Life isn't perfect, but it's moving forward, one day at a time. Sometimes I catch myself thinking about Amanda, not with anger or bitterness anymore, but with a kind of detached sadness. We had something real once, something worth fighting for, but she chose to throw it away for a fantasy that crumbled in her hands. Last I heard, she's still teaching at Princeton. Her colleagues whisper about her affair, though they try to be discreet. The scandal has faded, but its shadow lingers. Rachel and I still meet occasionally for coffee. We talk about work, about our kids, about healing. There's a comfortable friendship there, born from shared pain, but growing into something stronger. She's dating again, cautiously, taking her time to trust, to believe and love again. I'm not there yet, and that's okay. The bakeries keep me busy, and I've found joy in mentoring young entrepreneurs, teaching them what I've learned about business, about life. Emma jokes that I'm becoming a wise old sage. Ryan says I should write a book. Maybe someday I will. But for now, I'm content with the quiet moments. The early mornings at the bakery, surrounded by the smell of fresh bread. The weekend barbecues with my kids when they're in town. The satisfaction of building something honest and true. Life has a way of surprising you. Sometimes it breaks your heart, shatters everything you thought you knew. But if you're brave enough to pick up the pieces, to rebuild with wisdom and grace, you might just find yourself stronger than before. Not because you didn't break, but because you learned how to put yourself back together. The colonial house still stands, its charm intact, but now it feels different, not haunted by betrayal anymore, but filled with possibility. A reminder that endings can also be beginnings, if you're brave enough to turn the page. And